and he didn't say anything. He didn't respond at all. And I said, so I guess that, and I also told him that I'd called before. And I said, so I guess it doesn't do any good to complain to you guys. And he came back with, anybody can make a mistake. And I said, well, NBC has been making this mistake for 5 years now. And he hung up on me. And so I called him back, and I asked him for his name. And he says, I don't have to take this kind of abuse. And he hung up again. So I called the next day, and I asked to talk to a supervisor, and eventually got hold of a fellow, McCormick, I think his name was, in charge of broadcast standards. So that's an oxymoron if there ever was one. But anyway, he was very friendly, but he explained the whole thing. He didn't apologize for the rudeness exhibited by his people. But he did claim that these mistakes were made primarily due to ignorance and also due to the rush to make, get on the air, and that they just pull some stock footage out and without paying much attention to what was on it and throw it on. And I don't know that it could be accepted, given that NBC's when they use the pyrotechnic device to blow up GM trucks, and GM complained about it. They complained once, and that was it, and there was an apology. But I never have heard of any apology from NBC or any of the other networks for misleading the American public on the assault weapon business.
You're listening to Talkin' to America with our guest, William Tonso. Here once again is your host, Aaron Zellman.
Why would you say the intellectual community that you worked in for so many years is generally so anti-gun?
These folks, they're word workers. They're experts. They think they know how to run the world. And we live in a world nowadays of where we're encouraged to believe the experts, various social scientists and so on. These guys have a whole lot of theories, and they quite often don't even agree with each other. If you're not familiar with psychological and sociological theory on how people work, how societies work, and so on. But they all think they know. And if you're an expert trying to rearrange the world out there, and a lot of these people believe that sort of a secular priesthood, that where the priests of old had God on their side, now these people have science on their side because of their study of nature and so on. And if you're a world reorderer, you might find folks out there who sometimes don't want to go along with the plans that you have for them, and obviously if those folks are armed, it's going to be rather difficult for you to get their cooperation.
Let's talk about the specific political functions of gun control.
I think that they've been neatly summed up, if I can find that here, by a fellow by the name of Raymond Kessler, who is trained both in law and sociology. And he claims that, one, gun controls increase citizen reliance on government and tolerance of increased police powers and abuse. 2, help prevent opposition to government. 3, facilitate repressive action by government and its allies. 4, lessen the pressure for major or radical reform. And 5, can be selectively enforced against those perceived to be a threat to government.
I guess what you're saying then is that efforts to control gun ownership in the United States have not all come from left-of-center people.
No. In fact, my argument is that on the one hand, you've got the business right, business-oriented right, has attempted to control labor, essentially, through gun control. You've got the left that has been, the modern new class, you might say, the ones that control the small-town rural folks who don't necessarily want to go along with their social engineering efforts and so on. But when you get on the right side, the business, if you look back, for instance, with the control of machine guns, machine guns, I think it was John Ellis in his Social History of the Machine Gun, he points out that they've been sort of used as an alternative to collective bargaining by National Guardsmen and company guards, back in the early part of the 20th century. And there were the Ludlow massacre out in Colorado and so on of the National Guardsmen machine gunning the tents of striking gold miners. And no one complained about machine gun usage in those days. You started getting complaints about them, and they were eventually, civilian ownership came under federal regulation in 1934, supposedly due to the fact that guys were using machine guns to rob banks and so on. But Neil Knox has pointed out that the march on Washington, D.C., World War I veterans, and you had the march on the Ford plant in Dearborn, Michigan, and there was a lot of labor unrest and so on at that time. And he sort of suspects that the main reason that law was passed was that the establishment, essentially the conservative establishment, was worried about, rebellion, essentially, and the leftish takeover. So you had a lot of efforts along those lines to keep, the downtrodden. And, of course, you can go back to the attempts after the Civil War in the South to keep blacks from getting guns. What we would now call Saturday Night Special legislation was then called suicide. They were then called suicide specials.
I guess the other thing I'd like to add to this is the 1968 Gun Control Act had the blessings of most major gun makers, American gun makers. Mm-hmm. I don't know how many people fully realize that. You would think it's a little strange that the American gun makers would like more gun control, but it was profitable for them to keep guns from coming in from out of the country. Yeah.
And also inexpensive guns that could compete with their better quality guns.
If only the guns were the same quality.
Mm.
All right, well, why don't we tell people we can get your book again? It's called Gun Control Equals People Control.
Either Author House through authorhouse.com or by calling 888-280-7715. It's $11.50 plus postage through the publisher, or you can get it through any of the major bookstores, either online or just through the bookstore itself, or Amazon. Price generally runs around $13.50 if you go that route.
Well, Bill, I want to thank you very much for being on our show, Talking to America today. I've been your host, Aaron Zellman, and please remember, if you won't defend your rights, don't complain when you lose them.
Opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of JPFO.org or its members. Talkin' to America is a production of JPFO.org.